Welcome to the 700 Club. Thanks so much for joining us. Military defense, big tech, oil and gas. These are just a few of the billion-dollar industries that are regulated by our Congress. And some of the same lawmakers making those laws are investing in those companies.
That's right. These elected officials could be breaking the law or at least skirting it. Both Republicans and Democrats are now calling for a stop to stock trading by members of Congress. CBN's Tara Mergener explains.
Excuses from lawmakers range from an innocent oversight to clerical errors. Still, the revelation from this report is causing a show of unity not recently seen on Capitol Hill.
Go ahead, shout it out.
The gentleman is not in order.
Republicans and Democrats may not agree on much these days.
There'll be order in the House.
But Washington observers agree both are guilty of ignoring a decade-old law aimed at curbing corruption and conflicts of interest.
When you have so many members of Congress, and more importantly, their staffs that are actively buying and selling stocks that involve the industries and the specific businesses that they help oversee and regulate, it's incredibly concerning.
The 2012 Stock Act requires members to quickly disclose any stock trade made by themselves, a spouse, or a dependent child. Republican Senator Josh Hawley and Democratic Senator John Ossoff don't believe the process is working, and both are pushing bills to end stock trading by members of Congress.
You know, we know that lawmakers are not living up to the standard that they set for themselves, that they're violating the Stock Act's disclosure provision.
This isn't the first attempt at banning members from trading individual stocks. A year ago, House legislation would have required lawmakers, as well as their spouses and children, to put investment assets into a qualified blind trust. Another bill prevented trades for lawmakers and senior staffers, but not family members.
Sometimes even the far right and the far left coming together and basically saying, wait, why is this legal?
The latest debate follows a recent Business Insider investigation and other media reports of 50-plus members of Congress and some 180 staffers violating the Federal Stock Act. The offenses range from being late in disclosing trades to personally investing in industries they oversee. It follows the resignation of Federal Reserve Vice Chair Richard Clarida over questionable trading activity at the start of the COVID pandemic. Clarida apparently wasn't alone. The study reports numerous lawmakers holding, buying, or selling stock connected to COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers. Republican Senator Rand Paul was reportedly 16 months late in disclosing that his wife bought stock in a biopharmaceutical company that manufactures an antiviral COVID-19 treatment.
It makes it incredibly challenging when you have to evaluate decisions about vaccine mandates or how many shots do you have to have from a booster perspective before you're considered fully vaccinated. Are we talking about things that are truly being driven by the science? Or are we talking about things that are driven by these companies that members of Congress are invested in?
Other members are accused of actively shaping policy while investing in corporations that could benefit from their work. They range from military defense contractors to energy companies, media outlets, and more. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, whose husband's holdings include numerous tech companies, is a vocal critic of a stock trade ban.
This is a free market and we are a free market economy. They should be able to participate in that.
Violators of the Stock Act face a fine of about $200, usually waived by Senate or House ethics officials. Now watchdogs and even some lawmakers are using this report to call for stricter penalties. In Washington, I'm Tara Mergener, CBN News.
Well, it's an obvious conflict of interest to invest in a company or an industry that you're actively regulating, you're actively participating in either passing laws that could benefit or could hinder that industry. And so do we need this kind of regulation? In my opinion, yes. Let's go all the way back to 1988. It was kind of an unusual thing, but it was a declaration by George Bush as he was running for president that he was going to put all of his assets into a blind trust. And he wouldn't be able to control the investments, that he would have investment advisors taking care of that for him. That's not a bad idea for members of Congress. They can still participate in the market. They can still have investment income, but they don't control it anymore And so you don't have any accusations of impropriety or insider trading or trading on some kind of special knowledge that's not available to the general public. This law was passed out of concern over that 10 years ago. We survived as a republic for over 200 years without it. But here we are looking at it and saying, well, maybe we need something more. Blind trusts are not bad things, and they allow investment returns without active participation. That's probably something at this point in time we need to take up. In other news, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Ukraine today as Russia continues its unprecedented threat. Ephraim Graham has more on this story from our CBN newsroom. Ephraim?
Gordon, the Biden administration warns a Russian invasion of Ukraine could happen at any moment. It's sending $200 million in military aid to the country. Secretary of State Antony Blinken meeting with Ukraine's leaders to show support and send a message to Russia.
We've made very clear to Moscow that if it chooses to renew aggression against Ukraine, it will be met and it will face very severe consequences. And again, that's coming not just from the United States, but from countries across Europe and beyond.
There are more than 100,000 Russian soldiers near the border with Ukraine. This week, Russia sent troops into Belarus for military exercises. Belarus borders Ukraine and is a Russian ally. Blinken is supposed to meet with the Russian Foreign Secretary in Geneva Friday. Tensions with Russia are likely among the topics President Biden faces in his national news conference this afternoon. The president is scheduled to take the podium at 4 p.m. He's expected to announce a public reset just 1 year after taking the oath of office. The president's approval rating has plunged to 33%. His administration is beset by the pandemic, high inflation, and an increase in crime. Two murders on opposite ends of the country are raising concerns over public safety in America. In both cases, police say the suspects are repeat offenders and homeless. In Los Angeles, 24-year-old graduate student Brianna Kupfer was stabbed to death last week as she worked alone in a furniture store. Police identify the suspect as 31-year-old Sean Laval Smith. The victim's father says police told him the suspect should have been in jail. Meanwhile, in New York, police say an emotionally disturbed homeless man confessed to pushing 40-year-old Michelle Go in front of a subway train. While rising crime in the city's subways, the mayor, even the new mayor of New York says he doesn't feel safe.
New Yorkers feel safe in our subway system, and they don't feel that way now. I don't feel that way when I take the train every day or when I'm moving throughout our transportation system.
Homeless advocates say the increase in crime points to a need to improve mental health services. The LAPD reports about 10% of the murders in the city in 2021 had a homeless suspect. Chicago has been plagued by homicides, with 2021 being one of the most deadly years on record. As Charlene Aaron shows us, one pastor is taking a unique approach to fight back.
The Chicago Police Department says 797 people were killed in the city last year. That's 25 more than in 2020 and 299 more than 2019. Those hard stats are what's behind one pastor's 100-day campaign to end the cycle of violence by creating safer communities and opportunities for the city's youth.
When you have so many gangs like we have in Chicago who are predators on these young people's and keeping them from living productive lives, you're going to have issues as it relates to violence, as we're seeing.
Pastor Corey Brooks heads Project h.o.o.d, a ministry that empowers youth and families. He says the deadly violence in his city is part of a national crisis.
I believe that violence is a lot like cancer as it relates to the fact that if you don't deal with it, it spreads.
Murders in America spiking to the highest rate in 25 years, the closest it's come to the crime wave of the early 90s. Minneapolis had 96 murders last year, one shy of its 1995 record. Los Angeles saw its highest number of homicides in 15 years with 397. And New York reported 488 murders in 2021, the highest since 2011. Back in Chicago, the neighborhood where Brooks's ministry is based was once named the most dangerous block in the city. To change that narrative, Brooks is camping out atop a building in Chicago's South Side in the middle of winter. His goal is to create a community center where kids can learn, play, and thrive.
One, I want to bring awareness to the violence in Chicago so that we can come up with some solutions from around the country. But two, to raise as much money as we possibly can so we can build a center that is focused on just that, solving the issues of violence and poverty, helping to change the trajectory of individuals' lives so that they're not participating in gangs, so that they're not likely to be a shooter or to be shot.
Brian Anderson credits Brooks and his ministry for helping him avoid that path.
It was proof positive of how dynamic God's grace really is on a person. Right. So to be able to be as close to Pastor Brooks as I have been for years, even before, I really began to develop my own personal relationship with Christ. So to kind of see him through those eyes.
Alexander, who earned both a political science and law degree, now works with Project h.o.o.d, helping lead the next generation.
It's one of the really great things that Project h.o.o.d provides is community, and just belonging and just being. And just being in a good environment. I think I just really needed to see someone lead in the way that he leads.
Pastor Brooks believes that the church has the power to change the atmosphere of the city and bring peace to its people.
I really do believe this with all my heart. If all the churches in Chicago would just all out blitz with the gospel, especially with the children and teenagers, we could see things change instantly and in the years to come. I think the church is the hope of the world.
Meanwhile, this pastor is fasting and praying and hoping to leave the roof on February 28th with the funds to build his community center and begin rebuilding lives. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Church is certainly needed for community and relationships. Gordon?
Because church is absolutely needed, and I would submit that any place in your city where you know the police don't even want to go there, well, that should be your target. How can the church invade and in that bring peace, bring tranquility, bring the gospel, lift people from poverty, all the wonderful things that happen when you believe the gospel, you believe the good news, that you're made in the image of God, that he loves you infinitely, he died for you. All of these things are wonderfully empowering, and we can empower our communities. We shouldn't retreat and go into our little sanctuaries. We need to expand. Jesus said the gates of hell cannot prevail. Gates are always defensive things. We need to be on the offensive. That's what the church is supposed to do. We need to take these gates. We need to take back any area of our city where there's violence, there's crime. Let's invade it with the gospel.